everybody, and welcome. This, I think, will be a short video because I basically did what I should have done in the last talk about the dispute uh, of evolution versus creationism, or design versus God. Design versus experiment. Uh, that's the basic. But I didn't quite see that a lot of people respond to this one, and so I'm thinking either I didn't say it very clearly, or they don't understand what I'm talking about. So I might add some summary or direct points to the series of lectures I'm talking about here. So this is for this purpose. I believe that my theory, I mean the philosophy I advanced here, the instantology and absolutology, already has settled this dispute about the evolution versus creationism. Well, I just want to add, and well, let me say, if you listen to the videos, I see a lot of people are watching. For those two guys, you see, one is called Dr. Kevin Hovind. The other one is called Lawrence Kress, and Kevin Hovind is a doctor. He got two degrees, both in education, and one is a master, one is a doctor, both from the field of education. Dr. Lawrence is a biologist, also a physics physicist. So he's on the side of science much more than Dr. Kevin Hovind. Well, the point is, this debate, the evolution versus design or creation, it actually, in my opinion, uh, both of them are somehow has problems on each side, to tell you the truth. And well, let me just comment on the the way they are doing it. If you listen closely with their argument, especially for Dr. Kevin Hovind, he said he did like 700 already for many years, and he also has a sort of a dinosaur ground to exhibition for display or for entertainment locally. And they argued mostly about the facts. That is, when we will say you didn't get this fact, how can you prove the evolution? Then the other side will say, well, you have problem too, and what the Bible says there, let's say, create the day. The Bible says the God creates the world in 7 days, or whatever the God says is not true or something. They dispute about the facts. So according to either facts missing or misleading or cannot follow it literally, they argue back and forth all the time. I think that's their problem. And the problem here, from the philosophy's point of view, and it's obvious that they don't know any of them, both sides. Neither of them knows much about philosophy. They talk very shallow, very I mean, without any philosophical training, and anyone who, if and who he understands philosophy, will say that because their talk are nothing about methodology. Nobody questioned the other side. What methodology you use to prove your stuff, to prove your theory or something? Nobody questions about that. Nobody. They cannot have the idea. Facts are experiments or experience that is by chance. Okay? Knowledge consists of two parts. The first one, the superficial one, is the facts. Facts are accidental. What it means? It means you either can come across it or you can miss it. It doesn't have necessity in it. Okay? Another kind of knowledge, obviously, none of them understand, is called the truism or analytical principle. Okay? That is, the theorem is deducted from axiom. Okay? The truth is implied already in the premises. They don't understand this one. Okay, so none of them will argue anything about the methodology. What methodology you use to argue against other points? This is the first point I want to make. But that is not important so far at this moment, because I feel that according to the current status of philosophy, philosophy really cannot give them guidance for any of them. They both have some strong points and weak points. Nobody can convince the other because both of them use facts to convince the other. Okay? Facts means not principles. Okay? You can come across it accidentally or not. It doesn't mean necessity. That's their problem. But a deeper problem is our current state of philosophy. The philosophically, no new theory advanced before this instancology and absolutology. No big system advanced for last half a century. So nobody can give a guidance to them as which one is correct. That's the problem. So everybody holds some reason. Everybody has some shortcomings or defects in their argument. And actually, when I listened to Dr. Kevin Hoving's argument, especially when he says, if you believe evolution, how can we tell right or wrong? Where is our moral standard? Something like that. And that's a very good question, actually. That's very good. The other side normally will argue you cannot go literally according to every word the Bible says, because there are a lot of things Bible says we don't follow either. Let's say God will say if a girl is not a virtue when she marries, we should stone him to death or something. The other side will say that. So we don't follow exactly. But actually, I think Dr. Kevin Hoving's point is very deep here. It's not only simply to follow the Bible literally. He really raised a big question. It has a deep meaning, okay? In terms of this instancology and absolutology, I'll let you know why it is so, okay? Okay, here's my point. The new theory, what I understand from this point. I talked about the absolute, about the relative, the division of the two. Okay? To summarize them, what I told before, like 30 videos before, well, because I made it in a hurry, I didn't explain probably in detail. It makes it more difficult, as in the past 4 years. Very, very few people understand this point. When I divide the absolute from the relative, the absolute is a function, okay? It calls the emergence of the relative. When relative comes up, it's one. It's something. Okay, that's the first one. Okay, we should remember this. Then immediately, that's a potential, by the way. Then immediately it will show two sides in this one. That's for everything is like that. For every creation. What's the two sides? That is the matter part and the life part. Okay, so in other words, I'm saying absolute, when absolute creates the relative has a part or inherited from the absolute. So it comes with the absolute inside itself. And if the absolute first is represented locally in this something, in this relative, as one, as life in it. Okay? But only later on, when conditions are okay, the surroundings, the environment is okay, life will come out. Otherwise, matter and life are representing each side of absolute and the relative. So remember that. In other words, Descartes is correct. Dualism is for the relative. In our world, it is dualism. There is no crossover from matter to change to life, or from life to matter. It's not like that. That's the point. Okay. Later on, these two, like our the the rails, the two lines of the rail. Okay, they both come to the absolute, the relative world, but they never meet. That's the point. Remember this point. Only when conditions are ripe, the life part, the absolute part, will show itself. Actually, in my theory, the journey of the absolute from the absolute itself, if you look at one of the graph I draw, I call it the absolutology. There's a little x. That's consciousness. Consciousness goes the whole way, the entire journey of the absolute, and eventually emerges in human's brain, in the two parts as called consciousness and the thinking. Okay, so in this whole journey, the absolute first, when it creates something, is first, it's a hidden life in it. So it's two sides. Okay, here the dualism is correct. Okay, from this point on, dualism started. Okay, in other words, matter will change, but only within a certain degree. That is, micro evolution is correct. The life side, life will change too. Okay, macro evolution is correct. But there's no crossover from one side to the other. Remember, this is a crucial point. Anything in our world, as long as it is in this, within this relative, it is dualism. It is two sides. Okay, the two sides doesn't go across each other. Okay, they evolve gradually within a certain scope. That's the idea. They changes very little by little. The changes are all uh, quantitative change, no qualitative change. Well, to some extent, you may say there's some, but it's relatively, I mean, basically, the life and the non-life won't cross over, won't have any crossover. Okay? So, because the relative can never develop into absolute, but the absolute can create the relative, then put itself in it. But eventually, the absolute first showing as life, then later on as a human being, eventually as consciousness, as thinking, reflect the whole universe. That is the whole journey. If you understand this point, you know this explains that why we have this argument. Why I say Instancology and absolutology settle this dispute forever, once for all. This is the reason. I hope you can get my point for this, and you can understand the what I have been stressing for so far, explaining the absolute because it's so important and also maybe so difficult to understand because there's a lot of things ahead of it. If you don't understand, you probably won't get it. Let's say uh, Parmenides' ideas or Plato's ideas or Hegel's ideas or Heidegger's ideas or even Husserl's ideas. And of course, the last one is Instancology and absolutology. If you didn't reach this part, you probably don't get it. You don't know what I'm talking about. But try hard to understand this part. You will feel like suddenly your mind opens up. You understand why. Absolute matter will never come to life, and the life can create the relative, that is matter. This is a one way. But when matter was created, it carries with it the life behind it. The life only emerges when environment is good, are suitable environment, everything there are suitable for life to appear. Then eventually this life will, according to evolution, it will change it within some scope. Eventually human beings are developed. Then eventually the brain, the consciousness will realize the absolute. So this is a whole journey. If you understand my theory, this philosophy, so-called philosophy, you will understand the whole thing. Okay, I just want to add this part. There are so many arguments, so many disputes. People are so confused exactly just because in the past, no philosophy, nobody ever come to this stage to say things within such a theoretical frame, to put things under this light and to understand that. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say for this part. Hope if you have any questions, please put under the comment. I'll reply. If it's necessary, I make more videos about this to let you know what I mean. Of course, if you read my book, if you can use Google Translation to do it, that's even better. Nowadays, language shouldn't be a barrier at all. We have all the computer stuff to translate back and forth between any kind of language, and you can at least get a rough idea what I'm talking about here. All right. I hope you understand my point. You will see. You'll be delighted. You'll be very happy to know the truth because that will satisfy the need of your thinking as a human being. That's what I hope. Thank you very much. See you next time.